Good day, fellow rockers and moshers. Welcome to the Metal Connection, the connection to all things metal. I'm J-Dub, and today on the show we're doing a top favorite 90s drumming album performances. And we got some big stars on the show here, some big star guests here on the show. So I'm actually I typically kind of lead off and get the guests to introduce themselves, and I'm going to probably do things a little slightly different here since we got some stars here and some local drummers, and I kind of want to pump them up here a bit. So I'm going to kind of introduce themselves for them. Again, they can introduce themselves when they actually make their picks. But anyway, we start up here right below me here. We got Taylor McDonald, talented drum protege in the making, from bands, from some local bands, Death Machine, Ascension Method, and the Unending. And Death Machine actually be performing here pretty soon in Vancouver on December 18th for a Winterfest fundraiser show. So if you're in the Vancouver area or whatever, if you're watching the show, check that out. And obviously check out Death Machine and the Unending and Ascension Method. I'll link that stuff in the comments in the description. And then we got Terry down here, and Terry's a kind of an all sorts type of guy. Cleveland, Ohio's very own. And yeah, he plays a variety of instruments, and he even does his own one-man band project, By the Knife. So you can go ahead and check that out on YouTube, By the Knife. And I'll link that in the comments down below as well. And last but not least, we got Bretton Melanson here, one of the main organizers of BC's largest running metal festivals ever, the Armstrong Metal Festival.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. Nice. And also he does play in the largely heralded Crushers Nomad. And most notably, off the top of my head, Nomad did open up for Ailstorm a couple of years back, and Ailstorm's quite a huge band, so that was a good show for them as well. And we're going to kick off the show here with we'll get Taylor to go first with his first pick. Actually, I will kind of halt it for a second, as I'm not sure if everyone has their picks in order. I don't have my picks in order per se, so I would say this is just more of a general top 5 favorite performances. Again, if you guys do have yours in order, that's just an added bonus. So Taylor, if you want to take her away with your first pick here.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I do have mine in order, just from personal experience and just like what I've like grown up listening to and what really inspired me to just pick up the sticks and learn how to take it to the next level. My number one choice is it actually I wouldn't qualify it as like a straight 90s drumming act, because most of his like more popular performances started coming out in the like earlier 2000s. So like technically you can qualify it by like 1999, but my number one drummer would have to be Joey Jordison of Slipknot. He was that was the first time I actually sat down and listened to music that like, well, for one, blew me away with his speed and technique and just how advanced it was for me at the time, being a kid that was listening to Disturbed and Korn and basic rock music. Like it was just, I was alternative, but it wasn't that far yet. And that I could definitely say like that music has changed the way that I've approached drumming entirely. Like he was quite the legend. So he would have to be my number one pick. And all throughout the albums, it just kept becoming more and more of a inspiration for me. So I don't know if you guys wanted to chime in on Joey Jordison here. So
I definitely do.
Yeah.
I actually had Joey on my list too, specifically for the self-titled release from '99 that I believe J-Dub held up for a second. I grew up like just blown away by Joey Jordison's style. Like when that album came out, I'm not gonna say there wasn't anything like it, but man, his playing was just, it was so belligerent. That's the best way I could put it.
That is the great way to just belligerent. Yeah.
Yeah, he just like destroyed his kit. It was just so blazing fast. In it's Joey Jordison. I actually went as for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 times as a kid for Halloween. So he was definitely a huge inspiration of my playing and music as well. So I'm right there with you on that pick.
Yeah, I played him in couple years ago. I played a Vancouver gig. It was like around the Halloween time, and I had the mask and I had the jumpsuit. And I tell you what, I don't know how they do that. I don't know how they get their instruments with masks on, man. Like I was getting like, it was cold, so my nose was dripping, and I'm like, there's like sweat, there's like nose drip, there's everything in my mouth and my face, and like it was probably my worst playing experience yet. So I don't know how the fuck that for their entire careers still. That's beyond me. But the fact that they killed it every single time is quite yeah, it's quite the yeah, I don't know how else to put it. It's belligerent.
It just adds to the impressiveness.
Absolutely.
Respect for Joey Jordison kind of didn't come till later. I kind of started out as a bit of a metal elitist, only being into the true metal.
Yeah.
But I eventually came around. Joey Jordison's one of those drummers that I say is maybe overrated by beginners who say he's the best drummer in the world, when he's up there, but he's maybe not the best in the world. But he's definitely underrated by people like who I used to be as metal elitists.
Mm-hmm. No, that's totally fair. And like that, there's a lot of there's an interesting controversy behind it, because he was very well known and very praised because of his speed. And then that's where like there's that division of like, yes, you can be technical and fast, but that doesn't make you an outstanding drummer. Being an outstanding drummer means having a vast variety of playing and different styles and different approaches, right? Like different dynamics. Because like you can, like I break it down as like being able to drum really fast is like, in a vocabulary sense, it's like saying tongue twisters really quickly. It's like, sure, that's impressive. You can like spit off like Peter Piper picked a pack of peppers really quickly, faster than the other guy. But like, if that's all you can say and that's all the vocabulary you have, you're not really showing off a lot of your talent as a drummer.
Yeah, I mean, speed isn't everything, but it's one of the things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's a great way to summarize it.
I think what you meant was that there's like an element of groove too that you need to have. Sometimes you need to hold back. Sometimes you don't have to give 1,000,000% to every single part. I think that's kind of more, I'm assuming that's what you were getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was funny that you mentioned the mask thing. It almost seems like we're adding a mask to the performance just adds a whole nother like talent that you have to have, right? Adding the mask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're definitely spot on with that. You know, leading into the back half of the 90s, everything was trending towards a new metal phase and alternative rock and things like that. And then when Slipknot burst on the scene, they kind of took the whole thing to the next level, just the whole aggressiveness just to the next level, so to speak. And you know, obviously Limp Bizkit was super popular around that time, and it's just totally squashed that whole thing, squashed that whole scene, and kind of killed that whole thing and got people into more extreme metal, right? Even just like you, all of you guys, and me in general. So, and I still remember the day I bought that and made all my friends listen to it, and everybody's minds were blown. So spot on with that pick. And Terry, I don't know if you want to just include that in your pick.
Yeah, that's what I figured. You could let Jesus, I can't see Bretton go.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I didn't know because I know that I believe that Slipknot was on your list as well. So
no, that's fine. I'll probably just that would just be my next pick.
I think we did just kind of get our huge Slipknot discussion in. That was going to obviously come up at some point. So we did get our great Slipknot discussion in. So Terry did, I believe, did pick Slipknot as well. So we will kind of just tie those in together. And then Bretton, if you want to go up next with your next pick.
Yeah, so I've picked out 5 albums and going in reverse order to get to number 1. My number 5 is Dillinger Escape Plan, Calculating Infinity.
Nice.
So totally bonkers way of approaching playing drums. It's like, screw backbeats. That's Dillinger Escape Plans. They've got such a unique sound, unique to the time anyway, and it's so well known now that if we're jamming in Nomad and we need to play this part like Dillinger, play a Dillinger part. You know exactly what that means. It's just snares everywhere, kicks everywhere. Screw the backbeat.
Yeah, Dillinger's super manic and off key and all these sorts of things. Yeah, very manic and just off key kind of stuff, offbeat kind of stuff. It's not something I'm super familiar with, but I do know of Dillinger Escape Plan, and I'm familiar with a couple other things, but probably not as deep as you are with your love with them. So that is a super great, unique pick that probably not very many people would be thinking of. So that's definitely why I have you guys on the show, because this is what's inspirational for you, or inspirational to everyone, and or just maybe just your favorite album performances in general. So all those kind of things. Yeah, that's definitely why I got you on the show, for things like that, to have these super unique picks that the standard people wouldn't be thinking of. The Panteras, Metallica, Slayers, and things like that. So that's a great pick. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with Dillinger here.
Big fan. Yeah, that's a great pick.
Yeah, I actually haven't listened to a lot of Dillinger myself, but yeah, it's in the realm of like metalcore, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Contest the Hero?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
What's the drummer's name actually?
Chris Penny.
Okay,
at the
cool.
time, they had a different drummer for the second half of their career, but better have that right.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I know. From what I know of Dillinger, like those the live shows are just crazy. The singer would be jumping off balconies and all sorts of wild shit. So yeah,
I know I've heard that term, like math. I don't know, math rock, math core, thrown out there before. I'm assuming because of the odd time signatures and changes. But yeah, I love Dillinger. They had their own niche, their own. They carved out their own little kind of space.
All right, cool. So I'll probably just take it away with my pick here. Again, mine are not in any sort of order. I just however they turned up, And my first pick here this would probably be hands down my favorite In Flames album, Colony. And at this point, Colony in 1999, I believe. And at this point, In Flames is just firing all cylinders. They knew exactly what they were doing. When they got into the studio, they know exactly what the sound that they were going for. And this is a super extreme melodic death metal stuff. And just even for me personally, this is my favorite In Flames album. I've played this album to death since I've got it or been a fan of In Flames, probably around 2001, 2002-ish. And this is one of those albums for me that the whole album's incredible. There's not a single skipper track, so to speak. And it's one of those things where I know the whole album off by heart. I know when all the time shifts and all the key changes are happening and everything like that. And the drumming is just superb, outstanding. And I will touch on his name since I don't know his name off by heart, but it's Daniel Svensson. And he was with In Flames pretty well for most of their whole career, right up until 2016, I believe. So this was a super talented guy, and in 1999 he fully knew what he was doing there, just mixing death metal with some melodic stuff, and he's an animal all over this thing. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with Colony, but it's a super dynamic album.
No, I do a whole lot of In Flames myself either, so I wouldn't have a lot to contribute to the conversation, but I'm sure you guys have listened to them quite a bit.
Yeah, they were one of my early bands that I got into when I was first getting into metal. Melodeath was kind of my big foray into metal. Yeah, In Flames. Who else was there? Children of Bodom, Arch Enemy. Those are big ones for me in the early days.
Yeah, the reason I kind of focused in on that for this show is I'm so in tune with that album where I know every little thing that's going to be happening next, all the little time shifts, the key changes, all the drum changes that are going to be happening on all the little stop points and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely why that kind of made its list for me. It's just kind of a super personal choice, so to speak. But again, these are all super personal choices, so that's what we're here for. And we'll get a keep her going here with Taylor's next pick.
Yeah, so my next one is Flo Munir from Cryptopsy. And this was a guy that I had no idea about when I saw him, but he was performing a little drum clinic at the Wentworth in Kelowna. And once again, this was way before my my time with death metal or anything like that. This is still when I was just listening to Slipknot, Disturbed, and all this. So when I went to this thing, I went by myself, and there were a few other guys from the scene I haven't met yet. And when I first saw him play, that kind of the same thing that happened to me when I first heard Joey Jordison, that first kind of step into like that new territory. And I was blown away with how quickly he was able to play the drums and his like the finger techniques, his like double strokes on the kick drum. It really kind of sparked something. And even at this time, I'm getting lessons from a jazz drummer, and he's telling me like, oh yeah, you don't need to do that kind of stuff. Like you could just like mellow it out. I'm like, yeah, like I could, but I kind of want to do what this guy's doing, you know? It just like how like batshit crazy this guy's drumming. And I was like, man, that seems like something I want to do. So that definitely like got me taking slower steps into that realm of blast beats and just crazy tempos. And I'd say None So Vile was just it was very different when I got into it. I was like, I wanted more clean, proper, like coherent sounding metal. But then None So Vile just somehow it was able to scratch an itch for me for like just like off time, sloppy, brutal, quick, fast, aggressive, unaudible garbage noise that was just so pleasing to the ear. Like it is so contradicting to explain, but man, it got me, man. Like it absolutely got me. So yeah, None So Vile was definitely one of those records that still to this day, like if I'm in that mood, I will blare that shit. I will fucking crank it to 11 and just like feel that kind of like negative energy and just like have it kind of like cure me in that sense, just kind of like cleanse me of the bullshit that's like going on in here and in here. Just like it just goes away when I'm in that space, and then I come out of it and I'm like feel like I just had a therapy session, you know what I mean? Like that album is like it'll go down as one of my top 10s for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much right now because it's kind of a spoiler for what's coming up in mine.
No, fair enough.
I was at that clinic though, and I had already met Flo by that time because we booked them for Armstrong Metal Fest. So
Right,
yeah, getting to meet one of my heroes, Flo, was, man, I love organizing Armstrong Metal Fest for that kind of stuff.
No kidding. I bet that'd be really sweet.
Yeah, and yeah, Cryptopsy kind of just takes death metal to a whole new level where they're like technical death metal basically, and yeah, they were almost touching on a whole different speed where you know there's kind of a Corpse, Deicide, Morbid Angel, and then Cryptopsy is kind of almost taking it to another level, and some of those albums that are just almost even hard to digest because they are so freaking fast and technical death metal stuff. And that's just super incredible pick. That's most likely going to show up somewhere else here on the show. So we'll probably not try to touch on that too much. But actually, I know, and I'll probably tell my little story now about Cryptopsy, which I didn't realize I had. But I did see Cryptopsy live way back in, I don't know the year specifically. It must have been 2003 or something like that. But it was a really interesting point in the band because I know Lord Worm, the original singer, had left Cryptopsy and came back for a couple of years or something like that. And I just lucked out where I happened to see Lord Worm right when he came back and did some reunion shows with the band. And I seen them on that kind of tour in that first phase when he came back. And I remember being all jazzed up. Again, this isn't a singer show or nothing like that, but I was kind of jazzed up to go see Lord Worm, the original singer, and then he's got his little cup. He's got, I don't know if anyone ever, you can go on YouTube and probably watch old shows, but he'd bring this, he'd bring this kind of, he'd bring a cup exactly like Bretton showing up there, and I don't know, he had blood and shit in it, not real blood or whatever, he had fake blood or fake whatever, and it'd just be kind of, he had this whole cadence and vibe about it, and Cryptopsy was firing on all cylinders with that live shows with Lord Worm back in the band.
Oh, he had worms in the cup that he would eat
Right.
on stage and feed to people.
And people would just eat the worms. They're just like, yep, well, I'm seeing my favorite band now, and the vocalist is putting a worm in my mouth. What else do I do? Just full eat the worms, man.
Kind of grateful that I haven't seen Cryptopsy with Lord Worm for that reason.
I'm glad that if I were there, I would have just been like a couple rows back, maybe not in the front row, but just like a couple rows back.
But just before we get back to drummers, I just want to get it out there that their current singer, Matt McGachy, does not get his due in Cryptopsy. He is amazing, and people need to stop shouting out for Lord Worm to come back, because Matt is doing a bang-up job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I've listened to some of their newest records, and like I actually really like the way that it sounds. It seems like, in comparison to None So Vile, it seems like it's way more put together and clean. And I believe that the vocalist now like really does this with like a pristine like belting out, in comparison to like Lord Worm in that sense, where it was like they're almost two different styles in that sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely spot on pick with that. Those guys are pretty well technical death masters, and if nobody's is familiar with them, they are a Canadian band. So, Bretton and Taylor and myself are all Canadians, so that's probably why they're super influential to these guys here. So, spot on with that pick, and we'll go ahead with Terry's next pick.
Okay. Well, I didn't have mine in order. I just went with pretty much the first gut instinct, the first 5 names I could think of. So I'm gonna go with and I'm sure this is on somebody else's list, Gene Hoagland from Symbolic from Death. Sorry, the album Symbolic from Death.
Yeah, that was
pretty. Oh, you going ahead? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's like no, you go ahead. But I was just mentioning that was like makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, there is a lot of stuff you could pick from Gene Hoagland. I just went with my initial gut instinct. That album is, might be one of the all-time great metal albums, death metal albums. If anybody else wants to chime in, Gene Hoagland's the man.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you, especially Symbolic. Like that was definitely has to be one of my favorite albums. Just with like, and it almost ties back with what I was mentioning before with like how you can play fast, but that it always just, it matters how you incorporate it with your grooves and your fills. And like he was able, and this is great, like he was able to make the drums sing in that sense, like the way his accents worked, his hi-hat works.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it was like so connected with the music that it was like something that not a lot of drummers can really properly pull off except for him. Like he's just a mastermind behind the drums, 100%.
Yeah, I feel like Gene Hoagland's a machine pretty much in human form.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, that one was very close to making it onto my list. It was on the list of 10 that I had to whittle down to 5. And Gene Hoagland, another guy that I've been able to meet because he did a clinic in Kelowna as well at Level, and just the most genuine, nicest human. Just a joy to be around.
That's sweet.
Yeah, I think it'd be sacrilege if we did leave Gene Hoagland out of this conversation, because obviously he's probably one of the most respected drummers in the world, metal, rock, or any genre in particular. Anybody knows Gene Hoagland and his talents, and I will kind of touch on something that you guys may be not familiar with, but Gene Hoagland's first band, Dark Angel, the first album that he had with Dark Angel, I believe Darkness Descends. I know it's Darkness something. I do own it, but sometimes all these titles, like all these freaking titles, just blend into each other. But it's Darkness Descends or something like that. But yeah, kind of early innovators of kind of death thrash, you call it. So if that's not something viewers or anybody is familiar with, definitely go back and check out Gene's beginnings there with that first Dark Angel album. Well, the first Dark Angel album, what didn't feature Gene Hoagland, and he came on with their second album, so to speak. But the first album with Gene Hoagland is just an absolute masterclass in death thrash. Yeah, incredible stuff.
Yeah, there was something else about Gene Hoagland that I like when I joined Death Machine not listening to any death metal whatsoever. So when I was asking some of the guys like, hey, so what are some bands I should be listening to kind of like catch up to speed here? And Dylan, my guitarist, he tells me to listen to Death Clock. And I was a little like adamant at first, but then I realized like I was able to hear the words very clearly, and the drums were like, you know, heavy and beating. And I was thinking to myself, like, it gave me that confidence, like, hey, I'm able to play this. Like, I can't play that fast, but I can definitely play this style of music. And I was very fond of it. And Gene Hoagland I don't know if he was the writer, but I do know that he recorded the drums for those albums. So
yeah, absolutely. And I do want to touch on your band, Death Machine. Freaking love those guys. You know, I've probably seen you guys probably 5, 10 times, almost all your shows. I think I actually seen your guys' first show ever. I think I was there. I wasn't 100% sure, but I did think I've seen your, first or second show ever. So yeah, Death Machine, really badass, old school 90s death metal kind of sound, tone, vibes going on there. And yeah, you guys are bringing it hard. So definitely, any viewers at home, check that out. Here, I'll link the YouTubes and band camps for that kind of stuff, and they sell shirts and stuff. So really badass stuff to touch on with that. And I did just want to bring that up since you did mention your band there for a second. But we will continue on here with. I think we got a little lost, but yeah, Terry's next pick. No,
it should be yours.
Yeah, no, that was your pick. So it's actually Bretton's next pick. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So my number 4, At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul.
That's a good one. I don't know how I didn't think of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, the big thing for me from that album is it's one beat. It's the skank beat in triplet form, which changed how I saw that beat. At the kits, this might be too loud, but you know the standard skank beat. It's just the kick snare. But in Slaughter of the Soul, the song, and a number of other songs on that track, the music's in triplets, so the accent keeps shifting from the kick to the snare, kick, snare. Then from that, I started kind of taking out the hi-hats on the in-between hits so that you'd only be hitting the hi-hats on every third beat to kind of really push that accent feel. Like, and that's something I like to throw in my own music everywhere I can. So big influence for me.
Nice. Yeah. With the last Unending gig we played, we were playing a couple shows in Alberta, and when we played the Decimate show, we played Slaughter of the Soul and the last songs there. And that's a song that we learned for a while, but we just haven't really felt super comfortable playing it live. But we finally nailed it. We finally pulled it off. And yeah, it's quite the ripper. Like if you're playing all the notes in between, like, because there's the hi-hat part and then there's going to the ride cymbal where the dude just goes off like the entire time. He's just like like just like that takes a lot of endurance, and like I've really had to work up my finger technique to try to pull it off, but like it'll start to dwindle right near the end. So like I'll kind of have to break it up with some like crash cymbal hits and just kind of like give my wrist and fingers that like second to like recuperate and get back at it. But like
Totally get what you're talking about.
right, it's just like those Europeans, man, they do it differently. They do it to like the next level.
and he is pounding on the drums and that, like a little lighter on the cymbal hand to keep it going fast, but he's hammering the kick and snare. Adrian Erlandson, he's a beast,
big time.
Yeah, and obviously At the Gates was super influential to all the bands that came after that. I believe Slaughter of the Souls 1996, and that was so influential to a genre that I love, the metalcore genre. All the bands that came after it, you know, the Killswitch Engages, you know, all that whole kind of scene, that they were just so inspired by that album. So that's obviously a superb pick. And yeah, it's just all the peers looked up to those guys, that album in particular. And yeah, they kind of just brought the next level, the next wave of kind of modern metal. Well, not even modern metal, but yeah, the next wave of what would be modern metal later on when Killswitch Engage hit the scene and kind of started incorporating a blend of kind of every kind of genre of metal. But that's where it started with some of those guys in the metalcore scene and things like that. Super influential.
Big time.
Definitely.
And actually, it's kind of, my next pick is kind of a little in that scene that those guys were in, although slightly a little bit different. And this might be a little controversial in the sense that I know the albums that came after for Carcass, Heartwork and Swan Song, would probably be the more popular choices, but for me in particular, I would go with the 1991 Necrototicism. I can't even say it right, but Necrototicism here from 1991. And yeah, this stuff is kind of just super incredible, where the early Carcass albums were a little tough to digest, and then the later ones that came after this are kind of, they slowed down and got a little bit more melodic, right? And then, you know, kind of brought in a whole new fan base later on. But this is kind of that in-between album for Carcass, where they were still super, you know, crazy aggressive, like the old, like with the albums that came before, and then they're also incorporating a bit of melodies and things like that. So that's why I kind of focused on this guy. And yeah, you know, the drummer's a complete animal on this album. What did I write down here? Yeah, just super punishing grooves. He's all over the cymbals there, with doing that iconic kind of grind, like blast beat sort of thing, right? That grind core is known for. Again, I don't get into a whole lot of grind, but you know, that is that iconic grind kind of cymbal work that he's doing all over this album. And even this album in particular, I've seen Carcass live. This album is super special to the Carcass guys, that they pretty well played most of this whole album live still. And yeah, like the whole set list is pretty well full of this whole album. So still to this day, this album is super. Oh, my cat's going crazy here. And yeah, this album is super incredible in the sense that they still play most of these songs live.
Nice.
Yeah, no, they that's definitely interesting that you mentioned that, because like they definitely came from like a very underground, grimy, grindcore sound, and then they further pushed and evolved almost in the sense of like, if you think about Death, when they started, it was straight up like death thrash, and then they went very progressive and like opened their sound to like their own unique style. And I think that's really cool of Carcass to have opened up in that sense.
Yeah, like I even think maybe if there were some other people on the show, they would have, like, or whatever, say if I was involved in the show, they might pick Heartwork or Swan Song just because they're kind of more popular. But yeah, no, I'm kind of more into the aggressiver stuff. And yeah, that Necrototicism is up my alley, where it's that perfect blend of extreme and there's a bit of melody. Even though I obviously love Heartwork and Swan Song, but in terms of drumming and kind of technical stuff and that classic grindcore sound with the cymbal work and things like that. That's why I kind of focused on that one as opposed to the popular ones that came later.
Yeah.
And cool. We'll kind of take it away with Taylor, your next pick.
All right.
Oh, sorry. Did you say Terry or Taylor?
Taylor. Sorry, Taylor. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Misheard you.
Okay, it's all good. Yeah, I'll have to say, now this one's a little controversial, only because there's a lot of backlash about this person, and I'm sure you guys can already guess where I'm going with this one, but my third choice would be Lars Ulrich from Metallica. And the big reason why he's on here is that was kind of like, and I keep going back to this same analogy, but like that was my very first memorable turning point as like a metal listener, because it was actually like I cannot remember the very first time I listened to it, but there's a cute story of me being 3 years old, and my mom had a family friend. We would go into like her van to like go to school or go back to her house or whatever, but I distinctly remember asking her to play the Off to Never Neverland song and just getting super like, hyped up in the back seat, just like banging my head, listening to the riffs, the drums, and just getting that feeling that you get from listening to that kind of music. And that was like, looking back on that, that's when I kind of knew I had that feeling like that was the direction I was gonna like pursue in music. So like, as much as it is easy to like poke fun at this guy for like not practicing enough or just not being that outstanding of a drummer himself, you know, like we all can't help but like owe it to him to like acknowledge the fact that he helped like give us access to metal. Him and his band Metallica kind of like opened everyone's eyes to that sound of becoming that mainstream band that like got everybody connected. Because if it wasn't for Metallica, I'm sure the majority of us wouldn't be into the metal the way that we are, to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lars isn't going to be on my list of favorite drummers. No offense, Lars. But we owe it to him for what he did for the genre.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that the Black Album is a classic drum tone, drum recording. I guess you could give some credit to Bob Rock. But yeah, Lars's playing it's definitely a big influence on a lot of the metal that we listen to now. So yeah, I think that's a good pick.
Yeah, gold standard for snare drum sound with the Tama bell brass.
Yes.
Hey, if your snare doesn't ring out for another 9 seconds after you hit it, you're not doing it right.
Hey, well, he is the backbone of Metallica there. Yeah, he is the backbone of Metallica there, and him and James have a super special connection. So that's kind of way Metallica's been able to endure for 40 odd years now, basically. So James and Lars are the backbone of that band, and that's obviously why they've been been so successful and been able to create some amazing albums along the way. And I know, yeah, Lars does get some hate and things like that, but I think some of it does just have to go along with maybe he's at this point he's just predictable, where people know what sound and what kind of what drum beats he's going to be doing. He is kind of predictable. So I think that's where some of the hate comes on with some of the later albums. It's like people just are predicting exactly what he's going to do, and I think maybe that's where some of the hate comes from.
Yeah, it's definitely like I believe there's just a lot of factors involved in that. Like you can pull up like fail montages on YouTube of him like not playing a fill right or something like that, and like I mean the dude's human. Like we all mess up and we all like do our fair shares of like, oh, we got to count the song in again, whoops. Like, and it's just unfortunate that like with Metallica it's like all eyes on them. Like their mistakes will be known and their mistakes are going to be documented on every single fucking video ever. So it's like there's that, but then there's also, I don't know, there's like the sense of like they are the top, right? That should, there's the jealousy effect, like that they're like, oh, what if the drummer for the very greatest band in the world doesn't play that well, then like what gives, right? So it's like there's a lot involved in that, and But I do agree though. Like there's a lot of like people are like finding him predictable with the offbeat snare crashes and little Lars isms, if you will. That's people will just like they'll find anything to poke fun of. But truth be told, we would do anything to be Lars for a second, to be in Metallica. So
in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool stuff. Absolutely. Cool. So yeah, well, Terry, if you want to go up with your next pick.
Yep. Let's see, again, not in any particular order. I think I'm just gonna knock this one out the way because I feel like a lot of people are gonna have an opinion on this one. I'm gonna go with Dave Lombardo, "Seasons in the Abyss" by Slayer. Did you find it? Okay.
No, this is from a freaking box set or something, right? But...
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's close enough. But yeah, Dave Lombardo. I grew up listening to Slayer. He's just a monster on the kit. He's probably one of the best metal drummers of all time, at least in my opinion. This album definitely could be his like signature work, I guess. It depends on your opinion of their albums, I guess. But this one for me was a big album growing up in the 90s.
Was he also in Rain and Blood?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. No, that was like I didn't actually listen to a whole lot of Slayer's discography, but I did listen to the essentials like Rain and Blood and their first one. And yeah, like that was, what inspired the death metal sound was just like hearing his super fast double bass and the skank beats and like that whole like atmosphere definitely created a whole new genre in itself later in the years. So yeah, definitely a great choice. I agree.
Well, with Dave Lombardo being such a talent, you can do no wrong with Lombardo, and he's a complete machine on those kick drums. And had this been 80s, I would have hands down put South of Heaven in here. I absolutely adore that record. In particular, the drums. The first time I heard that, I was like, this guy's drumming is next level, like perfection. Can I get that? Perfection. And yes, had this been 80s, I would have got South of Heaven on here without a doubt.
I'd have had Rain and Blood.
Mm.
It's one of those things where you really can't. I mean, any album that he played on, you could pretty much put it on this list.
Big time.
I also actually wanted to throw in an honorable mention that I almost picked, and I know it's not a generally everybody's favorite era of drummer with Slayer, but Paul Bostaph, the Diablos and Musica album in particular, it came out when I was like 9, I think, and it was for me one of the very first like heavy albums that I listened to. And I know it's not like on anybody's top Slayer discography, but for me personally, I always thought that the drum tone, like the recording on that album, and Paul Bostaff's playing was just for me, it was out of this world. So
there is an interesting mix kind of production on that album. I couldn't really touch on like the specific word I would use to describe it, but it is a bit of a kind of a unique sound and mix to it in general. And obviously it's not one of the super high up tier Slayer albums. Well, for me personally, but I do own it, and I do jam it once in a while here and there. It's not every month, every week sort of thing, but I kind of just do off the top of my head remember that it does kind of have a bit of a different production and sound to it. And obviously, if that was one of your first Slayers that you would have heard or something, that's influential to you.
Yeah, it was. I actually used to listen to it like front to back, like constantly. And then I was really disappointed when I read online, like years later, that people were like, "Oh, this album sucks." And I'm just like, "Oh, for me as a little kid, I loved it." I don't know.
I think probably the main reason I probably don't know it off by heart, like I would like that In Flames album that I showed, like I just know that off by heart. Like you're saying, this album off by heart. I think probably the reason I don't is for the album that they did before that, the covers album. I wasn't too into that covers album. So then when they put that out, I was just kind of checked out a little bit from the previous album, and then I go back later. I'm like, okay, yeah, this album is pretty good. I don't know why I would kind of dismiss it for whatever reason, but yeah, great picks, great Slayer picks on that. And Bretton, if you want to go up next with your next pick.
Yeah, my number 3. I wanted to get one non-metal album in here. So my number 3 is Blink-182, Enema of the State, Travis Barker. Just like Joey Jordison, Travis Barker is that guy that's maybe overrated by his diehard fans that don't know everything about drumming, but he's very underrated by elitists. Back in high school, I and some friends did all the small things for the high school talent show. I figured, this would be easy. This was at that time where I was like just becoming an elitist and didn't think highly of Travis Barker. And then I had to learn one of his songs, probably the easiest song on the album. And I had a hell of a time learning it. There's some awesome drumming in there.
Yeah, the one thing about Travis Barker is like how sophisticated and, technical he can play, but just how reserved he is all throughout his music. Like he lays down the groove and he accentuates his fills, and he does the job, but he also has fun doing it too, which is really cool.
He sneaks in a lot of really complicated stuff that you don't notice on first listen. Not until you really dive into it and try and learn it that you discover how hard it really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's even almost one of those guys where when you hear him drumming, it's Travis Barker. Like he has his own unique style. Like I know he's featured on a million albums, and he's guested on a million tracks and things like that, rap tracks and just everything, right? And yeah, he's just one of those guys where when you hear his drumming, you pretty well know it's him just based off his his own uniqueness his unique thing that he has. And actually, I guess to keep her going, but I actually did see Blink-182 live years back. I was just kind of on a days off, and I found out that Blink-182 was playing in Vancouver, and I was like, oh, screw it, frickin'. I just got in my car and just drove down to the show and bought a scalper sort of ticket, so to speak, and got myself into that show. And I'm surrounded by the fandom Blink-182 fans, and I was a casual. I know all their hit songs, so they pretty well play their set list. I know the whole set list sort of thing, just based off the whole thing's a hit song. And the arena's just full of these fangirls just yelling and screaming every single word, every single track. And I know for me specifically, I was pretty well just had my eyes on Travis Barker most of the night. He had there's like some fire things behind him, and he had his little drum solos and things like that. It was super cool to actually see Blink-182, and probably something I wasn't even planning on telling, but so it was a bit of a different show for me. I typically go to metal shows and I want mosh pits and things like that. The opening band, A Day to Remember, did have a mosh pit, so I got my mosh pit in there for that. And then for Blink-182, I was like, I didn't really know what to expect, so I snuck in a bit of mushrooms, and a very low dose, right? And I took some low dose mushrooms just for Blink-182. So then when Blink-182 came on stage, it kicked in a little bit, and kind of got me into the kind of atmosphere thing that they were going on. I had a really fun time with that.
Yeah, no, I can't remember how old I was. Pretty young, must have been preteen. But I was the 7th caller to the radio station, and I won Blink-182 tickets, and then my parents wouldn't let me go because they're too inappropriate.
That's so unfortunate, man.
It's rough.
Had you had maybe played them some of their popular songs, maybe you could have won them over, and they would have let you go, maybe.
Well, no, they knew too much about Blink-182. If I'd shown them more, it wouldn't have helped me.
Oh well. Oh, that's too bad you couldn't go to that. But I guess it's actually my next pick here, and this is kind of just one of those. Actually, another interesting pick. It kind of just lines up with your guys' picks again. This just for me, this guy just is a super. He has his own flair. He's kind of a really showman, showmanship type guy, and I got to go with Morgan Rose from Seven Dust Home album here. And yeah, Morgan Rose is one of those guys. He has a super flair to him. He has his own kind of unique style, and he's kind of a showmanship guy where playing live, he does he flips the sticks, and he's quite the showman type guy. And I really love Morgan Rose. He's been a big I'm not a drummer, but he's been kind of inspirational to me, where it's just like he's always been one of my more favorite drummers, just because he does have his own unique style for sure. He's not just like kind of following what other people are doing. He created his own unique style, and he just built his own style. And I absolutely still adore Seven Dust to this day. There's Seven Dust is still around, and and actually I ended up watching. I don't even know how I ended up watching this or whatever, but he's even influential to a lot of bands that came after, like some of the younger guys that created bands after Seven Dust. I know specifically like Hailstorm. I was watching a little bit on the Hailstorm drummer, and the Hailstorm drummer is like, yeah, Morgan Rose was super influential to me. And so, yeah, he like even his peers still look up to Morgan Rose and Seven Dust. So, Seven Dust definitely had to make my list just because he's always been one of my favorite drummers. And I did actually get to meet. Another one thing that I just busted down to Calgary one time, 8 hour drive, and I just had to go see Seven Dust, and it kind of just worked out extremely perfect. Where I went into the club after with some friends that I met at the show. We went to the bar, the club next door, and we're just sitting there eating, refueling, from our little boozy night sort of thing. And in walks Lejean and Morgan Rose, and I'm like, holy shit, it's crazy, right? And I'm not one of those type of people. I don't really care about stars. It's not my thing to like bum rush people and like, oh my god, he's a big star. So I didn't even realize. I was just like, oh, that's cool, they're here and whatever. But then the friends that I was sitting down with, they were like nudging me and like kind of convincing me to, man, you got to go up once the crowd dies down, and because everybody starts crowding around them sort of thing. And they're like, hey, once the crowd dies down and things quiet down for them, you should go like introduce yourself and get a picture and all that kind of stuff. And they kind of nudged me and talked me into going to meet Lejean. And at that point, I lost track of where Morgan went, and then as I was leaving, Morgan Rose had sat down and with his crew and was eating, and I was like, oh shit, he's eating. I don't want to interrupt him. I was like, oh fuck, but I'm here, and this is gonna be a once in a lifetime opportunity. I was like, shit, I'm gonna bug him. So he's in the middle of eating, and I kind of like bug him. Hey, Morgan Rose, I love you. I've been a fan since 1998, and I'd love to get a picture with you. And he's like, all right. That's my little bit on Seven Dust there, and we'll go next with Taylor's next pick.
Yeah, so with my next one, this was the album that pretty much got me into death metal. In fact, it was my first guitarist, like my high school guitarist, and we were just hanging out, and it's funny how it turns out we were actually finding music to make fun of. We were making fun of death metal because of how much I did not like it. So we pulled up Cannibal Corpse tracks and we're just laughing because like, what? You can't even hear what this guy's saying. What? That's so stupid. And then we're like, oh, what's another band we can listen to? I don't know, maybe Death. And then this is when I pulled up the Sound of Perseverance, and we hit play expecting to laugh at it, and then we actually sit back and we're like, oh my goodness, man, this is actually like really good. And then we scroll down, and we're like, wait, they covered Painkiller? Okay, we click that, and we're like, oh, okay. All right, I'm going to have to take back a lot of things I said about death metal. This shit is fucking amazing. So this one goes off to Richard Christie for an amazing performance on The Sound of Perseverance. He's played in other projects that, well, let's be honest, didn't really quite reach his the peak of playing in Death, Sound of Perseverance. But man, it is another one of those great examples of speed, proficiency, technique, and just groove. Everything about it just like has this amazing, beautiful balance all across the board. And especially for like the way that like Death has turned out over the years, like with Chuck Schuldiner becoming more progressive and different, like writing different stylistically. So I think that Richard Christie really accentuated that style that they went towards.
It takes a lot to make people stop wishing Gene Hoagland was back in the band.
Absolutely. It's a tough act to follow, but he did it. So
Yeah,
he sure did.
I know that particular album in particular, a lot of people have their opinions on that based on who you talk to and what, there's probably 1 million Death fans in the world. And if you talk to all the 1 million Death fans, they're all going to have their opinion. It's probably would be 50-50 where half the people say they don't even like that album and the other half would like it. I fall in that I love it category where I actually prefer Sound of Perseverance over a couple of the other Death albums. Although, it's not my favorite, but I actually do really love that progressive sound that he was touching on in that album and the longer songs that he was getting into. I really love that album. So that's a great pick. And yeah, it's probably like a middle. If I had to do a Death ranking just off the top of my hand, that would probably be in the middle-ish pack for me. And yeah, I know I've even recently I've talked to a couple people or came across whatever on the internet where people are saying they don't like that album, and I just find that really odd that someone wouldn't like that album if they're liking some of the other Death albums, because even leading up to those albums, he was obviously starting to incorporate a lot of progressive technical stuff. So I guess maybe at that point that's just too progressive for some people. But yeah, I super love that. That's super unique album where like doing progressive death metal, so to speak. And yeah, it's super unique. I love it.
Yeah, you bring up a good point because like I listened to it having it be the very first Death album I've ever touched. So like from a like unbiased standpoint, in fact, like expecting it to be bad, it immediately blew my mind because like unbiased, it is a phenomenal album. And then once again, when you're talking to listeners that have been there since day one, they have that expectation of their sound and what they wanted to keep hearing from them. And like, I know a lot of old school death metalers that'll only touch like the first 3 albums by them. And then after Human, that's when they start to go like, man, it's just too clicky or too perfect. Like they want the raw, like almost like the blackened sound to it. So like, and that's totally understandable, like to each their own. But like you said, right, that's in the way that I listen to music, like my preferences, Sound of Perseverance definitely falls under that category, and can't go wrong with that album.
Yeah, I love the well, obviously it was mainly just the first album that he was kind of doing a pure death metal vocal, and then right after that first album, the next album there, he kind of switched into a more snarly type sound, even though like, we're not talking about singers, but even though Chuck was a big part of the band in general, so I would touch on that. But I love that kind of super snarly thing that he's doing on Sound of Perseverance, and the sound, the production, everything's just for me, it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, cool. I guess we'll go next with Terry's next pick.
All right, I'm gonna go with Igor Cavallaro, Sepultura. The album was kind of this is one of those I could personally pick almost any album he's played on. He's a fantastic drummer, but yes, the pick is Chaos AD for me. Yeah, Igor is, I don't know, just stylistically, it's got, the Brazilian influence, and Sepultura has just always been one of my favorite bands growing up. I was torn between, I wanted to be like offbeat and throw in Nation, which was a later album. I almost picked that album just because of it always kind of stood out to me among all their albums for the drum sound and the style that he kind of chose, or they chose in particular on that album. But yeah, Chaos AD, it's one of those influential 90s thrash metal bands or albums. It's great.
Yeah, I think I briefly touched on that album, and I definitely agree. It really mixed in with like the death thrash. Like this was before, the Bloody album or whatever.
Roots.
Oh,
Roots.
Yes.
Roots,
Really?
yeah.
Yeah, because like that's another band that has like transformed their sound. So like hearing what was the album's called again? Chaos AD.
Oh yeah, I went with Chaos AD, but like I said, it's one of those. I mean, you could easily throw Rise on there. You could throw Roots, like you just mentioned. I like I said, I had Nation in the forefront of my mind. Just Igor's playing. I don't know. It's not the most. It's not the fastest by any means. He just has that style. I just always a huge fan of his style.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
I'm a sucker for people who set up their kits really weird.
Yeah.
Like Igor having the floor toms up front, no floor tom where the floor tom goes.
Yeah, definitely weird. Definitely a weird setup.
I have to look it up. That sounds pretty got
Yeah, check it out. It is. He has a very unique setup, especially like later on in his career. He got really weird with it.
And I might as well touch on this. I have some honorable mentions that I kind of run through at the end of the show, but I might as well run through this now since we're on the Sepultura topic. And I kind of just I don't normally ask people's picks in advance, but I did just ask people's picks in advance just for viewers at home. I just try to show pictures or whatever. But and so you did. So when you told me you picked Sepultura, I kind of just took my Sepultura off the list, my Arise album. I lost my case, I lost my cover, but this is the Arise album from 1991, and this pretty well is like in my list or in my honorable mention sort of thing. And yeah, that's Igor Cavallaro, and at this point, Sepultura was firing all cylinders. They had just a kind of a big monster kind of, almost if I'd say it like an arena metal sound, where these guys were tuned for big festival shows or big arena shows, and they filled up that sound with just a massive thick thrash sound. And yeah, Igor was a monster back in the day. Well, he still is, but you know, back in the day, he was a complete animal. And I know I even love pulling up some old Sepultura shows from this era, from 91, 93, 94. And yeah, the band, like you can watch festival shows and things like that on YouTube, and the band is just incredible to watch from this era. Yeah, Igor's a monster. Well, they're all proficient players, so it was incredible stuff to watch live clips of Sepultura from this era, from 91, 93.
Yeah, huge influence. Another of the wonderful people I've gotten to meet through Armstrong Metal Fest has that S tattooed on his leg, Dave McGraw from Cattle Decapitation.
Mm-hmm.
But you met Igor, or are you?
I met Dave from Cattle Decapitation, who has the Sepultura logo tattooed on his leg.
Oh, I see what you're getting to. Oh wow, he got a Sepultura tattoo. Cool. I didn't know that.
I don't mean to cut you off, but funny story. That was actually supposed to be my very first tattoo at the age of 16. And my mom would not let me get it because she said that the S was too big. And I got a tattoo the exact same size, just not that S. So it's just kind of a little funny story. I just thought it was funny that my mom wouldn't let me get that. So I have a Grim Reaper, same exact size, but yeah.
Are you going to get the S eventually?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like I didn't get it then and it just got put on the back burner, but yeah, I definitely should get it.
Sure. Yeah, I got a Soulfly tattoo. I ended up just getting Soulfly.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you want to get in there? You know, I got my Soulfly tattoo there. I just ended up I pretty well just got that instead of the Sepultura, just because kind of Max in general for me was a big influence. So rather than just focusing on Sepultura, I just wanted to just get Max's kind of pride and gem on there. So yeah, I got that Soulfly tattoo. That would have been rad if you would have got that Sepultura tattoo, or if you.
Yeah. I should have. I still have my my left calf available, I guess. So.
And yeah, I believe we're at Bretton's next pick here.
Yeah, number 2. The first repeat drummer. My number 2 pick is Strapping Young Lad City, Gene Hoagland. What can I say about Gene that hasn't already been said? I already said he's a very lovely, nice person. We already talked about how he pummels those drums in perfect time. I love the double ride thing. That was kind of something Gene brought to the table. 2 ride
The weights.
Yes,
ankle weights. Yeah,
the ankle weights.
I have practiced with ankle weights because of Gene Hoagland.
It's tough.
I don't anymore because I'm getting too old for that shit.
Fair enough.
Maybe I should again.
Yeah, like that. It's good you mentioned the double ride, because like that is something that you hear in a lot of technical death metal nowadays. Like even when it was like one of the first times I heard it was in Beyond Creation. Like that was very prominent in the Aura. So when he's like lots of double bass, double ride, and then like snare in between, like it's cool to see how like that just like echoed throughout drumming, all because of that man. Like Gene definitely gave off that signature sound that just like inspired everyone else.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't seen his setup in a while, but last time I seen it, he almost just started mirroring each cymbal. I feel like he had hi-hats on each side. I know he does the chinas on each side, the rides on each side. So it's almost like he just mirrors the cymbals, and it makes for a very unique performance for sure.
Yeah, the second way I started setting up my kit, which was after I got kicked out of my first band, so I had to change the kit because it reminded me of being in my band that I just got kicked out of. So I tried to copy Gene Hoagland with the symmetrical layout, the 2 toms, crashes, then chinas.
That's good. There's something that's like another unique thing that I've noticed, which there's a playthrough of him playing The Philosopher, and like during like the main verse riff, he'll hit crashes and then the hi-hat, so he'll go dun 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 dun, but then he pinches the hi-hat for that part, but he doesn't close the hi-hat. He literally just grabs the hi-hat, so it goes dun 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 dun. Like who does that? Like who else does that? That's incredible.
Yeah, I have seen it a few other times, but I can't think of who's done that, because your feet are busy. You can't get the left foot over to the hi-hat pedal.
Yeah, it's he's just got that like to him.
Yeah, Gene Hoagland's a beast. Just flat out. He's just a monster.
I think at that point, every metal band on earth tried to steal him or get him in their band, right? And so it's like, well, he can only be in so many bands. So yeah, at this point, I think it was probably just fun for him to just pick and choose. Hey, I can pretty well just do anything I want, right? From Strapping Young Lad to Testament to Dark Angel back in the day to Death. So everybody wanted him in his band for a reason.
Absolutely.
And I guess I'll kind of veer into my next pick here. And another kind of interesting pick that kind of ties into right when we were talking about, even though it's not Gene Hoagland, but it's a band that he later appeared in with Testament. But even though he wasn't in the Testament in the 90s, or he might have been right at the very end, I don't think he was. I don't think he joined Testament till 2000s at some point. But before Gene Hoagland did join Testament, Testament hired a guy that was in White Zombie, John Tempesta, for the Low album, 1994. And maybe some people might not think of John Tempesta, but on this album in particular, in between the White Zombie albums, they hired him, and he's one hell of a groove machine on this album. It's kind of what's one of those super fun, kind of groovy, like super sonic, fun album. And yeah, he's just a super tight drummer and huge sound, big super great production. Obviously, that has to do with like mix and mastering, but still, you know, the fact that he's just a groove machine, the mix and mastering just lended itself very well to that album. That's an incredible album. I love that album. I'm just jamming it. I was just cranking her out before here, a couple hours before the show, and yeah, I did just want to mention, yeah, you know, he was the White Zombies drummer, and I think some of that sound that he was doing on Low later appeared on a year later with Astro Creep 2000, and Astro Creep 2000 is just a sonically dynamic album, super groovy rhythm beast, and I think that's where some of that sound was coming from, was that Testament Low album that he kind of just carried over right into the Astro Creep recording sort of thing. It's 95, and Testament Low, the Low was 94, and then Astro Creep was 1995. So I gotta think that whatever he was figuring out on Low, he kind of just carried it over into that impeccable Astro Creep 2000 album. And yeah, I don't know if anyone's got anything chime on Testament, on John Tempesta or White Zombie or anything like that.
Well, it was bugging me. I had to look it up. Gene Hoagland did the next Testament album, Demonic.
Oh, okay, yeah, there we go, yeah. Oh, so he would have,
Yeah,
yeah, he might have stuck into
95, I think.
Well, I think Demonic's 99, 90,
Oh, was it?
7.
Demonic's 97, yeah. So that actually would have snuck in there if somebody would have thought about that or whatever. But yeah, there is another tie in there that we were kind of just talking about Gene Hoagland, and then it just kind of just lucked out that my next pick was a band that he ties in with later on. So these are kind of all interesting picks, interesting layout that I had my picks in to kind of tie in with everything. So that was cool. And I guess we'll go ahead with Taylor's. I believe we're on last picks.
Yeah, and it's actually funny that we mentioned my fifth is Gene Hoagland, so I don't think we need to go on to our third segment on, but yeah, it's once again my album of choice had to be Symbolic. Same reason for Sound of Perseverance, just progressive, quick, heavy, groovy, everything just kind of like opening, you know, expanding the horizons to death metal drumming. So yeah, Gene Hoagland.
Oh, I believe he's got in the picture here. It's backwards, this guy.
One of the long.
I believe that's Hoagland right there. So.
Hey, one of those long-haired guys.
Yes.
Oh, that's definitely Hoagland right there. Oh, yeah, that's definitely him right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty well been half an hour on Gene Hoagland throughout all the picks and things like that. So I think anyone's done any chiming on him. And
we could have probably just talked about Gene Hoagland, honestly.
Yeah, your top five favorite Gene Hoagland albums show.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for next time. We'll do another Gene Hoagland episode.
I mean, he has enough work out there to do it.
And yeah, Terry did pick that as well, and then Taylor did pick that as well. So there's obviously a reason that it did get picked multiple times, and I'm sure we all could have picked it in general. So there is a reason that we all picked that, because it's one hell of an album. And Death in general is a super highly regarded band, influential to every band that came after.
Definitely.
And cool. And then I guess we'll get Terry up with his last pick.
All right. This is another band that when I was a youngster in the 90s, just getting into metal, they were a huge influence on me. The drummer is Vinnie Paul, the band's Pantera. And that's the album I went with. It was kind of a tough choice. This is another one. You could pretty much any album. Vinnie Paul is just the man. He destroys his kit. He just hits his drums like so hard with the back end of his sticks, or at least I think that's how he was doing it. I don't know if he had custom sticks later on, but yeah, I think he just flipped his sticks around and was hitting the skins with the bun end, and it just led to that fat Pantera groove sound that we all know and love, that influenced so much metal that we listen to today.
Yeah. Oh, that beat in Becoming.
Yes,
So-
that is particularly why I went with this album, was because of Becoming, because it's one of the very first things where I had no clue what I was doing with double bass, and I'm just like, I have to learn how to do this. I still don't have it perfected, but man, one day I'm gonna get it.
You do that with double strokes?
Becoming?
Yeah.
I'm not the most technical player, but yeah. I honestly, actually, do you know how to play that part? Since I'm just asking because you're on the kit.
Feet only.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then yeah. And not only that, the end of that song in particular is just like, it's insane.
It's a good song.
And had I not known you were going to pick this, I probably would have picked this as well. This is probably Vinnie Paul's best performance in terms of he kind of pretty well just he probably just pretty well modernized drumming at this point, where he pretty well just brought the whole new generation, the whole new wave of next modern metal, so to speak, and every band every band that came after in the middle half of the 90s wanted to copy Pantera, wanted to be Pantera, and that's for a reason, because Vinnie Paul was pretty well modernized what modern metal is today now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me either, but I could also throw an honorable mention with Reinventing the Steel. But it almost seemed like he was hitting his drums, like he was just hitting them even harder on that album, if that makes any sense. Like he just progressively hit his drums harder.
Oh, and actually something I'd chime in with, I didn't even think that I would be telling this story, but I did actually meet Vinnie Paul, and he did. I lived in Prince George years ago, Prince George, BC. I don't remember the specific year; it might have been 2002-ish, but I don't know. He was, I think, Pantera just ended, and he must have been looking for a little bit of dough, and he went on some sort of like drum clinic sort of thing.
Oh, like a clinic tour.
Even though he didn't actually do any drumming at the show, he was just doing meet and greet sort of thing. So he just showed up to these places and just did a little meet and greet, autograph session sort of thing. So I stood in line for a couple hours, and I brought my Pantera VHSs and got him to sign a couple Pantera VHS videos, and I got to shake the man's hand, meet him, and then years later I did see him live in Hell Yeah a couple times before he passed. Really tragic that the brothers passed. I still can't believe to this day that the brothers are not here no more. So really hard thing to think about for me growing up with Pantera. Even me telling you that I had the VHSs back in the day before DVDs even existed. So that's going back quite a while. So that was super cool to meet Vinnie Paul. He was wearing a cowboy hat. He was spiffed up with his little, his
crazy sideburns,
hair and everything. So he was spiffed up, looking good, and things like that. So that's a good way to remember the man.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's some great songs here on that one. Strength Beyond Strength, Becoming, 5 Minutes Alone, I'm Broken, Slaughtered is badass, Shredding Skin, Use My Third Arm, and I love the cover, Planet Caravan, obviously slower tune, Black Sabbath cover. Really cool if anyone if anyone wants to check, like anyone watching, viewers at home who might watch the show down the line, is go watch some live performances when they did Planet Caravan. It's really cool. The guys would just sit around, smoke a joint, playing that song, and it's just really cool atmosphere. And cool, we'll keep the show going here with Bretton's last pick.
Yeah, my number one, second one that's coming up for the second time today, Flo Munir, Cryptopsy, Blasphemy Made Flesh. He might have one-upped himself when he went and did None So Vile, But when Blasphemy Made Flesh came out, that changed the game. It was so much faster than anyone else had done up to that point. And like we said earlier, speed isn't everything, but it's a thing. And when the fastest anyone's ever gone was, I don't know, 240-ish, and he comes out opening track at 320, that's mind-boggling. It took 20 years for the death metal drumming community to catch up to him.
Yeah, it's funny because I know Taylor picked Cryptopsy and you picked Cryptopsy. Different albums, of course. The two albums were back to back. But it's funny. I'm trying to hold up the album here, not showing the actual album because I don't own either of those two. The only one I do own is And Then You'll Beg, which I believe is just 2000. But I wouldn't have cared if anyone would have picked that as well. But yeah, obviously at that point, Cryptopsy is just super fast, technical death metal basically, and stuff is a little hard to digest if you're just like a kind of a casual death metal fan and you just want like groovy death metal. That's kind of where I fall in. I kind of just want my groovy death metal, so to speak. So yeah, Cryptopsy takes it to the next level.
Yeah, and speed isn't the only trick in Flo's book either. He can play things complicated. He can slow down and groove when he needs to, when the song calls for it. And yeah, like the jazz breaks, they throw in Cryptopsy songs sometimes, like the opening of Cold Hate Warm Blood, or there's an awesome one on the newer self-titled album. Which song was it? Redskin Scapegoat. The death metal stops and some smooth jazz comes in for like 8 bars, and then it's back to death metal.
Yeah, super fast technical stuff, and that's actually why I do include technical, because it's supremely technical. Obviously, you guys are drummers and know the specifics about that a little bit more, but they definitely do fall in that technical, super fast death metal stuff.
Yeah, like all my other picks, I could probably play an example. I can't play you a Cryptopsy example. I can't play that stuff.
You probably got to be super in tune. Well, not even in tune, but you got to be like feeling good that day. You can't just be like sleeping like shit and hung over and things like that. Even though I'm sure he could probably pull it off, but he definitely takes his drumming real seriously. He probably practiced for years and years. He probably slept on the drum throne every day.
Yeah, I know I've taken a Skype lesson with him, and getting to know him through booking them for Armstrong Metal Fest. We've gone into his history of how he went back to school to learn human kinetics to find out what can make a human body drum better.
Oh, that's crazy. I actually didn't know about that.
Yeah.
It's dedication.
Yeah.
He really takes things seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Cryptopsy's no joke. And yeah, I guess I'll kind of Cryptopsy did show up a few times, so we did get our Cryptopsy in, showing our love for Cryptopsy here, repping the Canadian boys, repping the Canadian bands. That's cool. And my last pick, I didn't really make a whole lot of notes, just because this is my favorite Amon Amarth album. You are wearing the Amon Amarth shirt. I'm not too sure on your favorite album specifically. We'll actually touch it. You can chime in after I say my little bit here on if you can kind of riff off your favorite Amon Amarth album, if you do have one off the top of your head. But my favorite Amon Amarth album is The Avenger. And this would have been my first introduction to Amon Amarth, so to speak, my first album that I actually would have bought from them. So this is one of the albums I played to death, and I absolutely adore the production and mix on it, with the drums as well. And it's kind of odd. It's kind of odd even how I would describe the sound and production and mix on it. It almost sounds like it's a little bit muffled in the background, like in the hallway. Like I would describe it almost as like a hallway sound to it, but you can still clearly hear everything, so to speak. It just kind of takes a little bit of a backseat hallway sound, and yeah, super melodic death metal stuff here. Probably more veering in the death metal realm, but you know, I guess Amon Amarth would be classified as like melodic death metal because they were incorporating more melodic stuff like At the Gates and Carcass and things like that. So they were probably just influenced by pretty much all those things that I just mentioned. You know, At the Gates, Carcass, and then all the death metal bands from the early '90s, late '80s. So yeah, this I forgot even the drummer's name. I forgot the drummer's name, but obviously he's a super proficient guy, talented guy, and yeah, I absolutely love this album. This is my favorite Amon Amarth album, so that's why I kind of had to pick this here. And again, this is kind of super fast, extreme death metal stuff here. So he's got all the talent and he's doing all that kind of stuff. I can't really touch on what you guys could touch on.
Amon Amarth was one of those early bands for me when I first got into extreme metal, the melodic death metal side of it. And I just remember playing the Pursuit of Vikings music video over and over. And then as other music videos started coming out of theirs, they all had the synchronized windmill head banging in it. I was like, oh, that's their thing.
I know, actually, I do remember I was going to probably say a little bit, but the reason I do love this album so much is because it still has that really rawness factor, like that, like the production and mix and the drums, and even his voice is still really raw, and I just love that stuff. You know, obviously later on, Amon Amarth perfected their sound. They had more money they had more money to produce the later albums and kind of cleaned up their sound a little bit to make it more listenable, so to speak. But I do really find a charm and some rawness albums, so to speak, like even kind of like the first Death album, and you know, kind of a bunch of stuff from the '80s I really love, where it's like super raw, or even like the first Sodom album from like the In Signs of Evil. I really find a charm in some of that stuff where it's super raw, but yeah, we just touch on these really raw factors, and then obviously the bands are really young and full of energy and ideas back then. But,
yeah, that's another one of those. Kind of like what Bretton mentioned, where like just getting into death metal, it was one of those like bands it was easier to stomach. Like jumping bridges from like more mainstream bands like Metallica, Slipknot, Korn, getting into death metal, you needed that kind of like the middle ground between, you know, something like Slipknot or Cannibal Corpse, like that. Just like you need to ease yourself into it, and I feel like Amon Amarth served a great purpose for a lot of people in that regard, like allowing them to like listen to a song and find it really like, and not super fast, but like with like clear auditory growls. Like that was just enough for anyone to really sink their teeth into a death metal record for their first time. So I also have to like pay tribute to Amon Amarth in that regard. I listened to some of their more modern stuff. I can't name the album off the top of my head, but I do remember being in high school and just like dipping my feet in the death metal waters and having Amon Amarth being a great iconic band for that, for sure.
Yeah, I got into Amon Amarth kind of later as well, with when Pursuit of Vikings came out, and yeah, the drummer is a very talented drummer. I've always thought of them as just like Viking metal. I don't know if that's even a term technically, but yeah, they're just, and his drums, his grooves just fulfill that that theme, the sound that they've sculpted throughout the years.
well, and to chime in for a second too, you did mention that Viking metal is like, I know probably some you know, all sorts of various people are going to end up watching this show throughout the next whatever 5, 10, 15 years or whatever this show will be online for. But you know, there's going to be some of those old purist guys that would say Bathory invented Viking metal and with Hammerheart, but Amon Amarth definitely came along and kind of modernized the Viking sound, and they've definitely kind of popularized Viking metal, so to speak, with the masses. And I definitely will give a little shout out to Bathory, kind of starting that whole thing with Hammerheart. I believe Hammerheart was 91. So, and then Amon Amarth came along, and I think Once of Golden Hall was 97, 95, 96, somewhere around there. So there were a couple of years after, but they were probably a little bit inspired by that, even though I just think in general the lead singer was just super always into that stuff, even before the Bathory bit. So yeah, that's kind of a cool thing that you touched on with that Viking thing. And I don't want to put Bretton on the spot here, but what would be your favorite Amon Amarth album? I don't know if I put you on the spot or nothing like that.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I have a favorite album. Like my favorite song of theirs is Pursuit of Vikings. My favorite album art is this one. It's freaking Thor fighting Jormungand.
That's a great thing with Amon Amarth is they always have these incredible album artworks on all of them. Really cool stuff.
Yes, like my first band was also Viking themed, and being the drummer, my stage name was Thor. So years later, I named my son Thorian after that whole experience. So this artwork has a special place in my heart, and yeah, Amon Amarth has a lot of really good albums. I haven't really picked a favorite one.
Well, that is cool that you did touch on the artwork thing too, because that kind of brings up another thing in my head is that I really love that Joms Viking character that they made for the Joms Viking album. The cover's blue and just really cool stuff. I love the artwork on that. So much to a point where I had always planned on getting that Joms Viking character tattooed. I haven't yet, but I still even now to this day kind of intend at some point to get that Joms Viking character on me somewhere. I really love that guy. Even though they kind of have a character on all their kind of albums, whether it's pretty probably the same guy in their head, even though every artist that does it kind of does their own little variation of that guy. But yeah, I love that Joms Viking character and specifically with the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
But cool. I think that kind of just wraps up the show there. And yeah, you guys were super awesome there. Yeah, very awesome there. And yeah, I forgot what I was going to say, but chiming in and adding details and things like that, super awesome stuff. Thanks a lot, guys, for doing this. And yeah, I think we'll just kind of wrap up the show here. And thanks everyone for watching. Subscribe, mosh, and see you later.